Hello.
Hello. Sorry, we're in another meeting. We were with the DCC. Okay, there she is. All right, good. We are recording.
This open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, in response to the COVID pandemic, and the provision extended through March 31st, 2025 by the FY23 supplement budget signed by Governor Healy on March 29th, 2023. These provisions suspended the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on February 6, 2025 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Committee members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Paul Goldner. Sorry, Paul, we can't hear you. Caitlin Hunter.
Here and I can hear you.
Matthew Landers.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paul Lees.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paul Mayette.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Kelly Smullen.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Narissa Wallen.
I am here and I can hear you.
You want to try again, Paul Goldner? No.
You want to call in separately, Paul? You use the call-in number, like you can be on the video, and it's a nice workaround. Otherwise, it's really confusing. Also, where you're muted.
Administrators, please respond in the affirmative when I call your name. Triton Superintendent Brian Forget.
Here and I can hear you.
Director of Finance and Operations Brian Perry.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction Anna Bates.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Director of Student Services Shannon Nolan.
I'm here and I can hear you.
For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website, identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community, we're united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. What I'd like to talk about right now is the schedule. We had to move, well, I'm suggesting that we move the public hearing from the 26th to March 5th. So we would have a meeting February 12th, which is the tentative budget. February 19th is vacation week, so no meeting. February 26th would be budget deliberations. March 5th is the public hearing. And March 12th would be the final budget vote. So does anybody see any issues with that? Okay, the next item is oral communications from the public. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public, the meeting host muted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so by raising your hand on the video call or using the raise hand option on the participant screen. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public comment policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you are finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. The public comment policy language on the agenda states members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Narissa will be timing the 3 minutes per speaker. Please be sure to state your name, address before beginning your comments. Is there anybody that would like to address the committee? Seeing none. Sorry, fire alarm's going off here in my house. FY26 operating budget development. I'm going to turn this over to the superintendent to go through some updates. But as we go into this conversation, the goal tonight is to come up with a target number for administration to work with. As he is talking, I'd ask you to keep that in mind. Brian, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Very good. And I'm going to try and remind folks to keep doing that over and over again. So there is one document that I added to the agenda for tonight. It is a condensed version of the summary that we looked at on the 25th. Sorry, maybe my fidget spinner. That we looked at on January 25th. The goal here was not a proposal, right? So this number, the bottom line here, went up $500,000. The goal was to put in those things that we had been talking about to give you a sense, right? To give you a number of what that means. I know we had talked last time at the table, what if it becomes 3.6, 3.4, 3.7, 3.9? If we added this, we added this. So what this, again, condensed version, if we take it through, it's 4 pages. What I tried to do is highlight anything in yellow. So anything that's not, there's a column, it's called updated priorities. It's not proposed, it's not recommended. It's kind of updated. Here are the priority items that we've been discussing all along. Those that are highlighted in the yellow, kind of golden color, those are items that are not required. So those are items at this point that we are talking about that are discretionary, that are not required by a contract or by a cost of a service that we're required to provide based on a student IEP or other program and such. So taking you through the page, changes from last time, you see there's an increase at Newbury. There's a number of 85,000 as an increase for that grade 1 teacher. Again, grade 1, Newbury has 3 kindergarten sections, and they're already at 21, 22. So before move-ins, those are large classes. So the request was for adding a classroom teacher to keep class sizes in the upper teens. On the other side of that, if you look at Salisbury, there was a request for a grade 2 teacher, but it wasn't that it was a new teacher. They actually had an extra because of a larger class size in an upper grade level that was transitioning out of the school. So they had an extra teacher, and Michael wanted to identify that as that is, an extra teacher, but he wanted to put it in 2nd grade. That would have taken the class sizes to 12 and 13. And so in speaking with him, he agrees, right? While that would be wonderful, that is not realistic. And so what this does is it actually shows an increase of 85,000 at Newbury and a decrease of 85,000 at Salisbury. So that's a net, no addition, no subtraction. It's actually that extra teach at Salisbury. The funding moves over to Newbury Elementary School. Could it be a person? Yes. More often than not, it ends up with retirements and resignations and changes. It's funding that changes, and then a building principal makes those hires. So the other item there that is a in the green or in the yellow is supplies, and you'll see that under every school. You'll see that all of the supplies we're putting in there as updated priorities. We talked about this. I don't think we need to keep talking about this. The cost of supplies are going up. So we're either doing more with less, or teachers are paying for these supplies out of their pocket, which more times than not is the reality of what's happening. So generally it's a few thousand per school on average. So those are included in that category. At Salisbury, outside of the supplies and that reduction because of the teacher transferring to Newbury, the other two things there are the loss of the grant that is providing one special educator and that EL instructional assistant. So we have those included. Those are new costs. Those are not new positions. That is a level services for Salisbury. Obviously, it's an increased cost because we need to shift that from a grant over to the general fund. On the second page at the middle school, it's just supplies. There was no requests. The request is there for those supplies. At the high school, it's a reduction. There is an added FTE at the high school level that we didn't fill this year, and it was a wait and see what happened. And so at this point, we believe we can remove that. That's not a teacher that's currently in place. It's actually within the science department and based on enrollments. We weren't sure this year. It's working. Again, it'd be great to add a 0.2, 0.4, but we can make that work. So that's a reduction there. Again, supplies. And then for athletics, largely small numbers that are discretionary with the esports and girls flag football, savings with the unified sports. And then the 14,818 includes supplies as well as other contractual increases with stipends and contracts. On the next page, that contribution to the OPEB of 75,000, that's our third year of the capital funding plan. The first 2 years went into stabilization. This third year would start our funding of OPEB. Certainly is important, not required, so it's highlighted. The administrative restructure, as we talked about, as we look for a new director of finance and operations, moving the transportation and safety over to and creating a director of operations. We talked about that. Market corrections for administrators and support staff. Again, this is largely at the school level. And so that is included here. Again, I know Christine had talked about, and I'd helped her put those numbers together, looking back in budgets from 2007 and 2008, the idea of administrators taking no raise. That number there, the 139,111, is inclusive of raises for everyone who is not in a union, and it's assumed at 3% right now, which is standard what is being applied to most contracts. I feel like one might be cafeteria workers was slightly higher, but largely it's a 3% next year in collective bargaining agreements. So it's that same 3% for all other employees, again, but not required. The SLPA and the RBT, the SLPA, we are saying it's, again, it was in the cost avoidance column. That is a service we are providing and needing to contract out. We believe it's more effective to hire. And so that's truly a cost avoidance. So that is included there. And then the adjustment for the RBT is a shift in plan. I think it was roughly 78,000 and change. That was to hire a new RBT, which is a registered behavior technician, which is similar, an SLP, a speech and language pathology assistant, is kind of the assistant to a speech and language pathologist. An RBT is similar to the assistant for a BCBA. So the plan altered here, it dropped roughly in half. And that's because the idea is to take, we currently have an RBT and we've been unable to fill that. So rather than adding another RBT, this actually combines those two positions into a full BCBA, and the differential would be the cost to add to make that a full BCBA. And we would end up having a BCBA that's targeting the programs at Pine Grove, one at Newbury, and then one that services Salisbury in the middle and high school. And then the final other one that adjusted is in gold is the Chromebook plan. Right, so it's the 50,000 for the fourth year of the Chromebook plan. Again, is it required? No. Would it create real challenges? Absolutely, because we now would have 75% of our students who are on cycle to have a Chromebook refresh, and we would have 25% of our students who we don't have that for. So that number, I'm sorry, all of those numbers feed in and create a bottom line that is, we were at 3.2 and change in the document we looked at with the DCC, creates a number that's just about $3.75 million, 3.75 million, 74 million. And you can see what it does to the assessments there. Again, this is an example. It puts Newbury coming up on, puts Newbury coming up on $1 million at 950,000. It puts Salisbury at 1.2 million. It puts Rowley at 1.4, over 1.4 million. So again, we've said it several times, this is not a proposal. This is not a recommendation. This is to give you a sense of the scope of, you heard from the member towns and what they believe they can afford. And this is to give you a sense of, if we're going to do what we want to do, there doesn't seem like a path without reductions in other areas if we're creating these priorities. So this is more of a conversation piece than it is a proposal.
So I guess we have to start talking about is the number right now is 3.5. And we already know that that is not going to be able to be accommodated by the three towns. So I guess the discussion is to the number that we do get to, that Brian and his team will need to get to. So I don't know if anybody would like to start the conversation.
And I was going to say, if I can just add a little more context just on that, we talked about the adjustment and pushing the public hearing out a week. So it gave us an extra week in here to have these discussions and talk about reductions. If we're talking about reductions, we want to do it as late in the year as possible, right? So there are times when we're talking about trimming here and there, and it doesn't directly impact people. It is highly, it's near impossible to make cuts of $500,000 or $1 million or more and not have individuals identified as, folks that we're reducing. So in any given time, we want to have those conversations as late as possible. And so the goal tonight would be to give us guidance so we can begin working on those reductions, on what you believe the high water mark should be in the tentative budget. I think that's a balance of reality and hopes and dreams, right? So it can't, we don't want to, I don't want to say shoot too low. That's not the phrase I'm looking for, but we want to make sure it's realistic in a number that you as a committee are saying, we're going to stand behind this number, right? Come what may, this is a number we're going to go to the mats for. And so I think that's important because we may get more Chapter 70. And so getting down to that number could happen a number of different ways. I was so hopeful that Larry would get us our renewal on healthcare before tonight. I should have it tomorrow, right? Is that right, Brian? We should have it tomorrow. We're meeting with the PEC tomorrow morning. Would have been great to have that information.
Yeah, we should have it tomorrow. We asked very nicely to get it before 6 today.
I was nice, right?
Yeah.
too nice, apparently. Right. So it's a matter of getting to that number could happen a number of ways, but it has to be a realistic number that we're saying this is right. This is the hill we're going to die on. So I think that's the important piece. So we would then come to the budget next week with a tentative budget with the full document, right, that Brian is preparing. So it's the full multi-page document. It wouldn't have all of the cuts teased out because I can tell you we're not going to be ready depending on what the number is. And so it would likely be if there's things that we can say we know we're going to reduce this, then we'll put it in. Otherwise, it would say, you know, and to be determined cuts of fill in the blank. I would then, over the February break, work with the leadership team, and by the Wednesday, the 26th, right? That's the next school committee. By Wednesday, the 26th, would come with you. Come to you with a very detailed list of the reductions that I'm proposing to get to the number that you set in the tentative budget.
I just want to make note of what Neil had said, that is something we have to pay attention to, is that if we have the number where 2 or 3 of our towns have to go to an override, it will be more and more difficult to get the new building that we so desperately need. So that needs, as we talk about this budget season, we have to keep that in mind as well. Because we're not going to be able to go to the well over and over before the town say no. I think, as Brian said, and I know Paul Mayette doesn't like to hear this, but I know there's going to wind up having to be cuts. And we also need 2 of our 3 towns to support this. I mean, you want all 3 towns to support it, but 2 of them need to pass it in order for us to have a budget as well. Paulise.
So Brian, can you summarize what you think the towns have told us they might be able to afford, if they have told us that? I haven't been a frequent flyer at the DCC, so I'm not entirely up to speed on what they think they can afford, and they may not have said anything, but.
Yeah, I would say that I don't believe we've gotten a clear number, right? I think we heard clearly from Rowley, and I know Sherry had said it last DCC meeting, not tonight, that given where Rowley's at, they're just right. It's a cumulative effect. They knew this last year. It was going to be tough coming into fiscal 26. And so I think Sherry, whether tongue in cheek or otherwise, said even that reallocation, that $250,000 that they're starting out the gate as on their tab, just because of their adjustment would be a challenge. So I've been hearing that Rowley needs an override just to generally operate. Salisbury, you know, I heard Neil say that where they were at 3.5% last year was very doable. The 1 million plus is not doable. Something in between is likely doable. My guess is he would say, I think 3.5% would be about what, 550,000. So my guess is somewhere in between, and they would certainly say the closer you get to that 3.5%, the more doable. And then Tracy, the number I heard from Tracy tonight was that around 400,000, low 400,000s is the straight 50% of their new growth. So she did not elaborate. Neil kind of said, here's the number, here's, you know, the high end, we need to be somewhere between. She didn't say more than that. But that was the number that with their new growth, so their new growth is kind of new development as well as levy limit within the tax rate. They would be around, I think, just north of $400,000. So in the past, they've said, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but that's not a hard and fast number. They've been able to come up a little more, right? It means they're pulling from something else. But that I would say that's my summary of what I've heard thus far. I hope
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that summary is pretty accurate.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any comments or? Paul Goldner.
See, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Clearly now.
Awesome. So if I'm taking sort of that 3.5% from Salisbury and the 400,000 from Newbury, like we're talking about having to make cuts of about half of our proposed increases. Does that, like, that's what I'm hearing, is cut about half to get to one of those towns' numbers from where we're starting.
We can do a little, hang on. We have a calculator. I don't know, Brian, I don't know if you have it up. So the so an increase of 2.5 million, right? Take that as an example. An increase of 2.5 million is just under $600,000 increase, or a 596 and change for Newbury. That's a 4.94% increase. For Salisbury, it's a 4.58% increase, 732,000. And Rowley is a 7.61% increase, just a touch over $1 million. So as a barometer, $2.5 million increase, which over the sheet I just gave you is a reduction of roughly 1.2 million, puts Salisbury at about 4.5% rather than 3.5%. But it puts them squarely in between, closer to the 3.5 than the $1 million. It puts Rowley 200,000 ish over their straight calculation of what they have available for new cash for schools. Not a challenge tonight.
Narissa.
Oh, it is me. I mean, so I guess first I want to say, like, I hate going into budget season feeling like we're in mourning already. It's just an awful feeling to have to go through, and we've gone through it. I mean, in my time on the committee, every single year except for COVID years. And that's hard because there's realities that we're facing, right? And then there's need, and Paul was not wrong that we're not serving the schools, but I think what would it take to get to that point where we were? It's probably, we're talking probably $5 million, right? It's not even if we went for the 3.7, we don't get there, right? And we always have this sort of reality that we sit within, because we have to pass the budget. There's no choice around that. Personally, having done some numbers this afternoon and knowing what towns have been able to afford in the past, and I mean, it sounds like Raleigh's going to need an override anyway, from what Sherry said last time. And it sounds like a lot of things are still up in the air for them, but there's going to be some high costs, some of them contractual, some of them kind of by choice. I'm not sure where that number actually sits that triggers an override for them. So I'm mostly looking at Newbury and Salisbury. I think, as much as I hate it, we have to give Brian a target of about 2.5. I think the OPEB has to stay in there, because I think we when we come to being able to pass or put out a project, I think even a little interest change matters a lot. So we have to preserve our bond rating there. I think that it only I mean I think it would be a travesty, I guess, not to and very negative, not to continue to make sure that we have a set of devices on rotation, given that this is the last year to get that in, and knowing that that'll be disappearing essentially from the increase next year. So I'd personally like to see those two things preserved. The rest of it, like, I don't know what to, I guess it's hard to weigh the rest of it because I don't like to put myself in a box. We have a list of things in front of us, but there's also, everything that's sort of existing in the budget now that those all need to be weighed against. I think I can't see inside PNN, but I think we need to be carrying some sort of an assumption that's sort of in Brian's working spreadsheet, but we are not actively seeing in public because of negotiations for PEC negotiations. But I think that needs to be part of that calculation. And I don't know, that sounded, I still feel, no, it's so hard. Just, it's hard. So I can't say my brain is cohesive beyond that, but I think kind of that's where I'm at right now.
I mean, I agree with those things that have to stay in there. We can't not have OPEB or even stabilization coming out of, if we want to have a good bond rating. This is one of the toughest years that I've seen. And it's just not fair. I mean, it's not fair to the towns or to us how much the state's not doing their share. And I agree with the 2.5 because Newberry said 400,000. This puts him at 6. Salisbury said between $1 million and 5. This puts him at over 7. And Rowley, even if there was nothing else going and they had the 249, I think they were still going to have an override no matter what. And I think if we try and push it to where all 3 towns needed an override, that wouldn't be good for the school either.
I will say, we don't have the cost of we don't have the insurance rates yet. So even doing a 2.5 might not land us where 2 out of 3 towns are comfortable. So I think that's something that needs to be stated.
Yeah.
We are, we don't have all the information yet. So I will say, I agree with everything Narissa said, but my concerns, I agree with everything Narissa said, but I'm stuck where Narissa's stuck. It's not ideal. Looking at, it's to the right of my screen, looking at the document Brian shared earlier, taking away from that further or taking away from other places, we're seeing so many great things happen in our schools currently. So much improvement, so many things gaining ground. And it makes me nervous to say, okay, the new mark is 2.5 million less, but I understand that there's a trade-off there. So I mean, we can't harm a potential interest rate. And we can't take away technology from students on our final year doing it. So I'll just agree with everything Narissa said, but this is a really tough thing to say. And I know that it's still probably not going to be enough for the towns when they realize their full budget either, which makes me nervous.
I just wanted to clarify, what I was suggesting was taking it down to 2.5, not down by
No, sorry, too.
5. So I just want to make sure
You are
you're
right.
all okay.
I misspoke. But yeah, that was
I
me.
could have said it wrong, but
Nope, that was me. I was writing while you were talking and I wrote two instead of that. So that was me. But yeah.
I should say
I
too,
know.
I wouldn't be a good superintendent if I didn't offer. I mean, the 2.5 is a number I threw out there, and then I don't know if I led the witness, and that's where Narissa went. If someone wants to see a different number, I can calculate that as well, higher, not lower.
Well, I
No,
think you can't, go ahead, Nursa.
And
I was
only
just
one-
gonna say, like, when I was looking earlier, because I have built, I think, essentially probably the same thing that you're looking at on your side. I was looking at dropping $250,000 each time and seeing sort of where that brought assessments out to and how much of a decrease that was. So, I mean, I had taken it all the way down to essentially $1 million increase when I was looking at it, which is I mean, it puts everybody but Rowley in the ballpark, but it would be so catastrophic to cut. I mean, it's going to be bad enough as it is. There's always got to be, I guess, that point where you say, I can't go there. And for me, cutting 2.75 basically to get down to just $1 million increase, I can't go there.
And that's what I was gonna say. You said the 2.5, but you also said the numbers that would be assessed to the towns. And that was in the ballpark of where the towns are. I mean, we can go higher than this if we wanted to go 2.7, but then you're running into Newbury and Rowley Newbury and Salisbury not being able to afford it. 2.5 is the absolute maximum that I would allow to get cut, because we cannot go below that, because I don't even like it at the 2.5. Please don't misunderstand me. But this is not going to be easy for the towns. I mean, I think we've started to have a great relationship with our 3 towns, and I think they're being open and honest as to where they are. And the fact that we want to build a school, they're just being realistic that if we continue to go for overrides every year, it ultimately comes back to the people in the towns and what they want in their schools. But as you see, I mean, even when we have town meetings, you don't get people in there. So we need to be creative and try and reach where people are to let them know what this budget is. But as we all know, until it hits something that is important to them, that's when they'll come and speak or determine whether taxes should go higher.
So you had mentioned 2.75. So at 2.5, again, Newbury was just under 6, about 595,000. Rowley just a touch over $1 million at $1,018,000. Salisbury was about 730,000. If you up that to 2.75, Newbury goes up to 666,000. Rowley goes to 1.1 million, and Salisbury goes up to about 826,000. So just as a reference.
Yeah. And that right there would be 2 towns that would say that they needed to go for an override. Matthew?
What if we went to 2,625,000, which would put Newbury at 630,000, Rowley at 1,059,000 and Salisbury at 778.
Go to what number?
I'm sorry, 2.625.
So what were the numbers that you had?
I'm sorry, 630. I'm just doing round. I'm not doing the 1,059,000 and
Mhm.
778,000.
I love it.
That-
that's
well,
exactly what I work.
That's 2.
We don't
That's
need
2.5,
superintendent
and
and a
putting
business.
the OPEB in, and the Chromebooks in.
Say that again. It's the 2.5 plus
Then
OPEB plus
plus-
Chromebook.
Yes. We might have to go lower, but that would be my high water mark for them.
What does it make Newberry?
630,207.
What's it make Rowley
1,059,219.
and Salisbury?
778,674.
I had 675, just saying. It's off by a buck.
39 cents. So it's 60.
Yeah,
we're off
exactly,
by
round
60.
I think that 39 cents is gonna put him over.
You never know.
Narissa?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think Brian's gonna come to a ballpark, right? I don't I don't think we need to get that exact, but I also, I mean, at 2.5, we're already, if Newbury is saying 4 is their, prop 2.5, half of their prop 2.5 plus new growth. I think it may already be a stretch for them. And I just wanna, I guess, bring that back to the top because we didn't get, I guess, we didn't get a number that was set in the actual structure of their financial situation tonight. It was a quick calculation of, we know what our, revenues approximately are going to be, and then taking half of, what their new is. I think we can refine more, I guess, as we continue to have those conversations. And I hope Brian will be sort of having this with Tracy as time goes on as well, just to get an idea as they're actually going through their finances, what the reality is going to look like. Because it's not a real number to me, but I also don't think that we can sort of continue to climb beyond where the assessments are sitting at 2.75 or 2.5 because I guess this goes to, like, you're not wrong, we need a new building. I don't want to get to the point where it's a new building without staff, right? Or staff without a building to actually hold school in. Those are both really rough situations. So I don't think we can take Newbury to the point where they would need to have an override. If Rowley's there anyway, it is what it is. We're going to have to deal with it moving forward, right? And that's what I got as well. But I don't, if we can avoid having Newbury do an override and Salisbury do an override, I think we have to try.
Do you honestly think 36,000 is going to kill them?
Do I personally think 36? But I think 36,000, right? When it comes to Brian working on this, right? I'm going for a ballpark number, I guess. That's why I was looking at 250,000 apart, because I don't know. Brian's going to look at this and say, right, that it's a.
But I think it's a little different this year, right? Because normally we're having these discussions and getting this kind of a clarification from the towns, and I'm coming and the reductions in the tentative budget. So what we're saying now is we're not going to have all those identified by next week, which means it is there might be some, but then it would be, undetermined cuts to a certain amount. And so I think it is working towards a target a little more this year than in years past, whereas I was able to get this close, but it meant cutting this position. And then we say, no, that adds 70,000 back and we have a number. So it is a little, I don't like this process. Like, I want to do this earlier next year so that we have a little more clarity by the tentative budget. So I think it is, you're picking a round number as a target. And that is going to be the number for the increase in the tentative budget. And there will be a yet to be determined line reduction, likely a reduction. Right? I mean, there'll be certain things like I can tell you, if we're talking about getting down towards staff and classroom teachers, right? A salary correction has to be on the table, right? I can't talk about salary correction. I mean, Christine is talking about administrators taking no raise. I would never propose that if other people are taking a raise. I certainly can, yes, I shouldn't be proposing a correction at this moment in time. Fine, that comes off. So I think those types of things, yes, we pull those off the numbers for next week. Other than that, there will be hundreds of thousands of remaining reductions off of this that are undetermined yet. And so, because we need to do a little more clarifying before we can come up with numbers. So I say all that to just say it is a little different in that it's not just Brian managing a number. Like next week, you're not going to have enough information to refine it by 30,000, 20,000, 50,000. It's just going to be a target at this point. And then we'll manage it through the process to the final budget. And it can be, right? I mean, we haven't done this in a long, I feel like we did this one time back in those 07, 08, where even for the final budget, we agreed a bottom line number in the assessment to the towns, but it continued to adjust because there were further reductions that, another $250,000 in cuts that hadn't been determined by the final budget. Again, not the ideal way to do it, but similarly, as long as it gets to the bottom line and we say to our member towns, your assessment's not going to be any higher than this. If we get more Chapter 70 come April and we're able to not make a cut that we had identified, then we would not make that cut. We've in recent years gotten to the point where we get the number and then we say, okay, if we get more money, we'll have a discussion about what we do with it. We haven't been getting more money or we just hold on to it. So it is a little different this year.
Paul Goldner?
I guess we know Newberry is going to be tight, right? Even if we go down to that 2.5 million, maybe Newberry needs an override and maybe they don't because it's not half of their new growth. To me, Matt saying that 2.5 plus the OPEB plus the Chromebooks, I agree with what was said earlier by Narissa and Matt as well. Those are two important commitments we've already made in years past, and I don't like walking away from those commitments. If we go to the 2.625 that Matt said as our high water mark, like we can see where we're at. We should be getting more information from the towns. We're getting more information on health insurance increases and all of that, and we can move down if we need to in order to avoid an override. But I also don't want to be going below where we need to go before we need to go that low, because we are talking about class at 2.5, 2.6 even, we're talking about classroom type cuts, and those are going to impact the students greatly.
Narissa?
Sorry, we went in a tangent, and I'm just wondering if Brian remembers. I believe 07, 08 were the 2 years where there were multiple overrides in a row and they all failed. And then we lost a ton of students via choice to Ipswich. Is that, and then it upped the cost even more? Is that what I'm remembering?
I don't remember exactly which of those years. I remember there was we settled a 1-year teacher. We were in negotiations for a 7 to 10 contract with the teachers. And I know we ended up settling a 1 year with a 0. Everyone took a 0. And then we settled an 08 to 10 contract. So there was definitely, it was in those years. I don't remember if it was which one it was, but yes, no, there absolutely, it was a mess.
Yeah.
And 9 was still ugly.
Yeah, I think it was an override attempt and then went back, and I believe that the no increases were in the secondary budget after the first one failed, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because Salisbury's was, I think, an $800,000 override, and it failed.
You remembered how that went down. Not looking to repeat it.
Yeah, I believe it was 2 of the 3 towns that had overrides and they both failed. Is there anybody else that has any comments?
Again, just one more, I just want to say one more time, right? So the number you're gonna give me tonight is the number that really sets the assessments, right? So we keep talking about 2.5, 2.625. That's the number you need to give me, but it's really the assessments that it's yielding, because beyond this, I think it would be a clear message to say to the towns, right? So this is the number, it's the high water mark for your assessments. If we get more Chapter 70 or more regional transportation or fill in the blank and something miraculous happens with our healthcare or through negotiations, we're gonna take all of those savings to not make the cuts. Which I think further argues that the idea of not delineating the cuts and having those discussions publicly about people who are going to not have a job anymore makes even more sense. So while I hate the lack of certainty, I think the approach kind of makes sense given that we're in negotiations with PEC and such. So just to clarify that, right, even though you're voting, you're kind of giving me the target for the top number, really what we're saying to the towns is your assessments will be no higher than this.
So I think what we need to look at is whether we're going with the 2.6 that Matt had suggested, or the 2.5. I like his mathing with adding in the OPEB and the Chromebooks, so that's in there as well. And again, we can come down if so. I'm agreeing with Matt and saying the 2.6.
I mean, it's a high water mark, so I guess
Yeah.
that's a high water mark. But I'd also like to say math doesn't work that way. Not how math works.
Wait, I'm sorry, what was that?
Math doesn't work that way. That's like not how math works. It's like psychological crap. Math
Right.
Math does not work that way.
Matt's math that he came up with, I thought was an outside of the box type of thought. So I appreciate that. And I'm going to go, I myself am gonna say the 2.6.
So again, just to give you those numbers, the 2.625 is $630,000 increase of 5.25, roughly 5.25% for Newbury. One just shy of $1,060,000 or 7.93% for Rowley, and 778,000 or a 4.9% increase for Salisbury.
Right. So if anybody else wants so I guess those are the two numbers that we have on the table right now. Does anybody disagree with the 2.6258, whatever that number was that he had? I don't see anybody raising their hand in disagreement, I guess.
I was going to say, did you ask, does anyone disagree with the 2.625?
Yes, that's what I've asked. And again, that would be the high water mark that we're going with. Okay, Brian. 2.625 is the number.
Okay. So just to clarify, there will be some, obviously, I talked about some things that we would take off the table. And then others would be, the largest chunk of that would be a to be determined cuts. But we will have that, you'll have that as a tentative budget next week. Okay.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I forgot it
sorry.
in my initial whatevers. I think with Beth leaving and with Michael Estuccio being brand new, I think AP cuts have to come off the table as well. I cannot see having a brand new principal and someone who is at best new to the district, coming in with not having assistant principals in those positions to support them.
Well, I think with what we have for social, emotional and all that, I honestly don't believe a principal by themselves can run the elementary schools. I think that would be a lot to ask, and probably people wouldn't want the position. And that's important to make sure that we get the right people in those positions. And as we see with Salisbury right now, Salisbury is making gains right now. And I think if we were to take the assistant principal from that position, I don't think Michael would do as well.
I didn't realize that was a real suggestion to speak on, so I will say, please. I know we're looking at cuts, but I would not like to see assistant principals in the elementary school cut. They're already running around. I couldn't imagine, unless you came to the committee with a magical fix of who would step into those roles to fill that need set. I can't imagine that working well for our students or our staff to not have another administrator in the building full time.
And that goes for the middle and high school as well. I mean, I
Yes.
don't believe that you can remove those positions either. So that was just a comment that was made at the DCC, and I just wanted to, say that our schools wouldn't do well. Elise, you have a question?
And so with the reduction of the assistant principals, it's not only just the SEL component, it's also the teacher evaluations. I think that would take a significant hit. And not to have our teachers evaluated appropriately and thoroughly and competently would be a real problem.
Well said, Paul. Okay, Brian, you have your direction. You need anything else from us?
I think that'll do. Brian and I have some work to do.
I want to thank all of you. I mean, I know this is hard. This is the worst time of year, always. Some years are worse than others, and this is one of the worst that I've seen. And I appreciate your time and your thought on this. Can I have a motion to adjourn? We have to have a roll call vote. Paul Goldner,
Yes.
Hang on, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
any discussion? Paul Goldner,
Yes.
Caitlin Hunter,
Yes.
Matthew Landers,
Yes.
Paul Lees,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
Kelly Smullen,
Yes.
Narissa Wallen.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thanks, everyone.